I was halfway through changing the oil on my truck when I saw her stomping down the sidewalk in those ridiculous wedge sandals, clipboard in hand, rage in her eyes. Beverly, the HOA president from hell. Middle-aged, short blonde bob, always wearing some leopard print cardigan that screamed, "I hate fun." "Mr. Owens," she shouted like she owned the whole block, "you have an outstanding balance on your account, $27 in late fees. If it's not paid by Friday, foreclosure proceedings will begin." I stared at her, hands covered in oil, wrench dangling from my fingers. "You're threatening to take my home, over $27, she sniffed. "It's not the amount, it's the principle. The HOA has rules and you're not above them." I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the edge of the driveway. I paid my dues on time, every quarter. "You know that." "Not according to our system," she said, tapping her clipboard like it was the Constitution. "You were late last March. There was a processing delay, not our fault." Actually, it was. Their online portal glitched for 2 days. I had the screenshots to prove it, including the time-stamped email from their treasurer saying, and I quote, "We're fixing an error on the payment page." "I'll talk to the treasurer," I said. "That won't be necessary," she snapped. "The board already voted." "You have 5 days to pay or we'll begin the lien process." She turned on her heel and walked off like she'd just delivered justice. I stood there stunned. $27, and they were threatening foreclosure. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. That night, I pulled every document I had from the past year. Payment confirmations, email chains, even a screenshot of my bank statement. I wasn't just going to prove I paid the dues on time. I was going to expose how deep their nonsense went. The next morning, I visited Harold the treasurer. He was an older guy, soft-spoken, retired accountant. When I showed him the evidence, his face went pale. This isn't what I sent to the board," he said, flipping through the papers. "Beverly told us you never responded to the late notice. Said you ignored multiple letters. I never got a single one." Harold pinched the bridge of his nose. "This isn't right. She's using her position to bully people." That was the crack in the wall I needed. I filed a formal dispute with the HOA, citing the false late fee and demanding an audit of my payment records. Beverly responded by doubling down. She posted a notice on the community board accusing me of deliberate delinquency and hostile behavior toward HOA leadership. Oh, she wanted a war. Fine, I was ready. I contacted my cousin who worked in real estate law. We combed through the HOA bylaws, state statutes, and even county court records. I wasn't just going to fight the foreclosure. I was going to drag her and the entire corrupt board into the light. They picked the wrong guy to mess with. 2 days after Beverly's stunt with the community board, I walked into the county clerk's office with a folder so packed it barely fit in my backpack. My cousin Lisa met me there, business suit, legal pad, and a look on her face that said she wasn't here to play nice. "This is going to be fun," she murmured as we stepped up to the filing window. We submitted a formal complaint against the HOA for fraudulent enforcement of fees, abuse of power, and intentional misrepresentation of records. Lisa had added a claim for defamation based on Beverly's public notice. We weren't just pushing back, we were pushing forward. That evening, I stopped by the garage where my buddy Carlos worked. He lived 3 doors down and had been ranting for weeks about a bogus fine he got for unauthorized lawn ornamentation. Apparently, a flagpole with a military flag was too controversial for the HOA's taste. Carlos served 12 years in the Marines. He wasn't about to take it lying down. "They fined me $75 for the thing my kid gave me on Father's Day," he said, tossing a wrench onto the workbench. Then they added a $50 processing fee when I asked for proof it was against the rules. I told him what I'd found in the bylaws and showed him Beverly's little paper trail of manipulations. His eyes lit up. "I'll get my neighbors to talk. They've been sitting on stuff for months." The next day, I printed up flyers, nothing fancy, just black and white sheets asking residents to report unfair fines or experiences with the board. I left them in mailboxes, slipped them under doors, even taped one to the vending machine at the community pool. I offered to buy coffee for anyone willing to meet at the local diner and share their story. By Friday, I had 12 people. One was an elderly couple fined over a non-compliant mailbox, even though theirs matched the model number in the HOA's own design manual. Another woman, a night shift nurse, had been cited for excessive noise while she was out of town for a family funeral. Each one had documentation, letters, photos. One guy even had a voice memo he'd accidentally captured on his doorbell camera, 2 board members complaining about how they needed to clean out the troublemakers before the next election. Lisa's eyes widened when she heard it. "This isn't just overreach," she said. "This is coordinated fraud." We filed an injunction to stop the HOA from issuing any more fines until the matter was resolved. The court hearing was set for the following Thursday. Beverly wasn't happy. She rang my doorbell the next morning wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf like she was trying to avoid the paparazzi. She didn't even say hello. "You've stirred up a lot of hostility, Mr. Owens," she said through clenched teeth. "I hope you realize what that's doing to neighborhood morale." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "You mean morale was great when you were threatening veterans and grieving nurses?" She shifted her weight, clearly not used to being challenged. "We're just trying to maintain standards." "Funny," I said. "Your standards seem to change depending on who you're dealing with." She opened her mouth, but I shut the door before she could respond. That weekend, I got a call from a woman named Denise. She used to be on the board, resigned after a year, said she couldn't stomach the way Beverly ran things. We met at the park, and she came with a flash drive full of internal meeting notes and emails. Lisa and I combed through them for hours. One email stood out. Beverly had written to a board member, "We need to start putting pressure on properties that don't match the community image. Start with the ones near the entrance, especially the ones with older vehicles or non-standard landscaping. We can use the fee structure to push them out if necessary." Lisa exhaled slowly. She knew exactly what she was doing. Thursday's hearing was held in a small courtroom downtown. The judge looked like he'd been doing this job since the 1970s, and he wasn't impressed with Beverly's theatrics. She showed up with a lawyer who seemed more interested in checking his phone than defending her. Lisa laid out everything: the bogus fee, the manipulated records, the email from the treasurer, and the dozen affidavits from other homeowners. She played the voice recording, showed comparison photos of the mailbox, and dropped the bombshell: Beverly's own email about targeting properties. Beverly's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off. "Are you telling me this board intentionally fabricated violations to drive out residents they didn't like?" "There's clear evidence of that intent, Your Honor," Lisa said. "And my client has proof that the fee in question was never valid. We also have evidence that the HOA published defamatory statements about him to the community." The judge turned to Beverly. "Do you dispute that you posted a foreclosure warning over a disputed fee of less than $30? She fidgeted, then said, "It was within our rights." "No," he interrupted. "It was an abusive process. You don't get to threaten someone's home over a technicality you created. That's not governance. That's intimidation." He ruled in our favor on every count. The HOA was ordered to refund all improperly collected fees from the past year. Over 20 homeowners received checks within a month. They were also required to issue a public apology to each resident they falsely accused or fined, including me. The court even imposed a requirement for quarterly audits by an independent accountant, paid for by the board members themselves, not the community fund. As for Beverly, she was removed from office by a special board vote. The treasurer and 2 other members resigned before it even happened. Turns out, once residents saw the ruling, they started digging through their own records and found even more misconduct: missing receipts, inflated contractor invoices, and even a personal landscaping bill that had been charged to the HOA budget. That one got the county auditor involved. I didn't expect the sheriff to show up at her house, but a few weeks later, there he was walking her out in cuffs for misappropriation of funds and falsifying financial documents. Apparently, she'd been using HOA money to pay for cosmetic dental work and luxury spa appointments. Carlos called me the next day laughing so hard he could barely breathe. She tried to tell the deputy it was a misunderstanding. Then he read her the invoice for her dog's acupuncture treatment. Turns out, when you dig deep enough, the truth doesn't just come out, it explodes. The new board was elected by a landslide. I didn't run, but I did help draft the new transparency policy. Every meeting was recorded. All fines required photographic evidence and a signed report, and no fee could be enforced without a 7-day written notice and the homeowner's right to dispute it. I got my $27 back. But more importantly, I got my neighborhood back, and Beverly, she got 18 months probation, a $5,000 fine, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it hits hard. 2 weeks after the court ruling, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted like a storm cloud had passed. Lawn chairs started reappearing on porches. People waved again. For the first time in a year, the community felt like a place people actually wanted to live in. But beneath the surface, something bigger was brewing. It started when an older gentleman named Curtis stopped me outside the grocery store. He was holding a paper bag with a loaf of rye bread and a bunch of bananas, but his eyes were sharp. "You were the one who brought the board down, right?" he asked. I nodded, expecting the usual thanks or a story about Beverly's nonsense. Instead, he pulled out a folded document from his coat pocket. "This is a property tax notice from last fall. Says I owe back taxes on a utility easement along my fence line. Never got one of these before that woman took over." I unfolded it, scanning the details. It listed a parcel ID that didn't match his property deed. When I asked him why he hadn't disputed it, he looked embarrassed. "Thought it was legit, paid it to avoid trouble. Check went to the HOA's P.O. box, just like the letter said." I froze. "Wait, you paid it directly to the HOA?" "Yeah," he said. Letter had their logo. Same format as the fee notices. I told him to hang on to the receipt and promised to look into it. That night I called Lisa. She ran the parcel number through the county assessor's database. It didn't exist. "That's not a real parcel," she said. "And HOA boards don't issue tax notices. That's completely outside their authority." I called Curtis back and asked if he still had the envelope. He did. The return address matched the HOA's mailing box, but the postmark came from a town 20 miles away. Lisa got quiet on the other end. "They're forging tax documents." Within 48 hours, we had 3 more residents with the same story. Each had received notices claiming unpaid property taxes on minor easements or boundary adjustments. All had paid directly to the HOA, thinking they were avoiding liens. One woman even paid with a money order made out to Community Oversight Services, a name we'd never heard before. Lisa filed a fraud report with the county tax assessor. The next day, a deputy investigator from the sheriff's financial crimes unit called to schedule interviews. By Monday, the sheriff's office had seized the HOA's filing cabinets and computers from their tiny office near the clubhouse. A yellow evidence tape went up across the door, and 2 unmarked cars were parked out front. Residents gathered in clusters, murmuring, pointing, watching the officers carry out boxes. I was standing near the curb when one of the deputies approached me. "You're Mr. Owens?" he asked. "Yeah." He handed me a subpoena with my name on it. "You're listed as a complainant and material witness." I nodded. "Gladly." We spent the rest of the week interviewing with county fraud investigators. Each homeowner who'd received a fake tax notice was asked to provide payment copies, postmarked envelopes, and any communication they had. Lisa compiled everything and handed it off to the district attorney's office. Then the real bomb dropped. A forensic accountant assigned to the case uncovered a separate account registered to a shell company under the name Civic Resource Management. The address tied back to a rented mailbox in a UPS store. Deposits traced from HOA checks and money orders had been funneled into it for nearly 18 months. The account was controlled by Beverly. Lisa's voice was tight when she called me. They've got her for wire fraud, mail fraud, and fraudulent impersonation of a government agency. That's federal. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service got involved the moment they confirmed fake tax letters had been mailed across state lines. That's when things really escalated. By the following Friday, the FBI was on site. Beverly was arrested not at her home, but at the airport. She'd booked a one-way ticket to Arizona under her maiden name. When agents searched her luggage, they found 2 prepaid debit cards tied to the Civic Resource account and a flash drive labeled HOA lists. One of the agents who later spoke with Lisa said the drive contained a spreadsheet of target properties marked with color-coded entries: red for likely to settle, yellow for may dispute, and green for already paid. There were over 50 names. Each name had a dollar amount next to it. At the emergency town hall meeting held the following week, the interim board revealed something even more disturbing. "So far," said the new president, a retired school principal named Joan, "we've identified approximately $70,000 in unauthorized collections from false notices. Some of it went to Beverly's shell company. Some of it was laundered through HOA vendor payments to fictitious companies." The room went silent. One resident, a man named Allen who ran a small landscaping company, stood up. "I was contracted to do an irrigation project last year. They rejected my bid and hired a company out of state. I looked them up, no website, no phone number, nothing. Just a P.O. box in Nevada." Joan nodded grimly. "We found 3 vendor contracts that were completely fabricated. The payments went out, but no services were ever delivered." A woman in the back raised her hand. "What happens to all of us who paid those tax notices? Can we get that money back?" Joan looked over at Lisa, who'd been helping the interim board pro bono. Lisa stepped up. "We're working with the district attorney to file a restitution claim. Since this involves federal charges, the process will take time. But yes, if funds can be recovered, they will be distributed to victims." It took weeks for the paperwork to cycle through the system, but eventually, residents began receiving restitution checks. They weren't full reimbursements. Some of the money was gone for good, but it was something. And more importantly, the message was clear: you can't hide behind a clipboard and a cardigan forever. The state's attorney general released a statement outlining the charges: fraudulent misrepresentation, embezzlement, wire fraud, mail fraud, and impersonation of government authority. Beverly faced up to 20 years. Her co-conspirators, 2 former board members and an outside contractor, were also indicted. The HOA's insurance policy covered part of the legal costs, but the rest was paid out of pocket by the board members who had signed off on the false contracts. It didn't end there. A state senator introduced a bill called the Homeowner Rights and Transparency Act, directly inspired by our case. Lisa was invited to testify at the hearing. I went with her and sat in the back as she laid out what had happened, how a single person, unchecked, nearly bled a neighborhood dry under the guise of governance. The bill passed unanimously. Back home, things finally felt normal. The new board held monthly meetings open to all residents. Budgets were posted online. Contractors were vetted in public. And no one, not a single person, received a fine without documented, photographic evidence and the opportunity to appeal before anything went on record. Carlos stopped by one afternoon while I was resealing the driveway. "Man," he said, looking around the block, "feels like we actually live here again." I looked up, nodded. "Took a while, but yeah." Curtis drove by in his old Buick, gave us a thumbs up. A few houses down, the elderly couple who'd been fined for their mailbox were planting spring flowers again. I watched their granddaughter chase a butterfly across the lawn. We didn't just win a court case, we took back our neighborhood. One document, one meeting, one conversation at a time, the HOA had tried to take my home over $27. In the end, they lost everything. The first warm Saturday of spring brought more than blooming dogwoods and open garage doors. A dozen neighbors gathered on folding chairs outside the clubhouse, sipping lemonade and listening to Joan, the new board president, outline the community's new code enforcement process. It was clear and fair, nothing like the weaponized policies of the past. She spoke with a steady cadence, pausing between bullet points to make sure everyone could follow. I stood near the back with Lisa, arms crossed, listening more than watching. After everything, I still didn't want to be the center of attention. I was just there to make sure it all stuck. Carlos nudged me. "You seeing this? They even put the budget online. Took me 10 minutes to find out how much we spent on storm drain repairs." Lisa didn't look up from her phone. "That's because it's real governance now, not a one-woman regime." It felt like closure. But then, 2 days later, I got a letter that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from the Office of the U.S. Attorney. Inside was a formal notification. I'd been identified as a material victim in a federal case, not just a witness, an injured party in a broader criminal scheme. They were building a wire fraud and racketeering case under the RICO statute. Lisa read the letter twice. They're going after her like she's a crime boss. This isn't just about fake fines anymore. Over the next week, subpoenas went out to vendors, contractors, and 2 real estate brokers. One of them, a man named Derek Langford, had facilitated quick sales of homes after residents gave up fighting the HOA and moved out. Turns out, he'd been tipped off about which homes would be pressured, next purchased at below market value, and flipped within months. Langford had been writing kickbacks to a consulting company registered in Nevada, the same one that received payments from the HOA's budget for legal research assistance. The paper trail looped back to Beverly's cousin, who worked in escrow management. 57 properties were involved in the scam. Lisa's voice was flat when she read the numbers. They used fake violations to drive people out, then sold their homes to inside buyers. This wasn't governance, it was organized displacement. The scope was staggering. Elderly residents, single parents, veterans, anyone who pushed back became a target. Fines would escalate, citations would pile up, and eventually they'd receive foreclosure notices. Most didn't fight. Some didn't even understand they had the right to. Others left without selling, thinking they'd defaulted. With the new board's help, the U.S. Attorney's Office assembled a full list of displaced homeowners. It took almost 3 weeks and dozens of interviews. I personally called 6 people who'd left the neighborhood during Beverly's tenure. 4 still lived within the county, 2 had moved out of state. "I thought I was the only one," one woman told me. "They said my fence violated color codes twice, then they charged me for removing it when I didn't even take it down." Her home had been sold the month after she left. Langford had brokered the deal. The FBI issued a formal press release. Charges included conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, falsification of financial statements, and deprivation of property rights under color of law. The RICO charge was the big one. It meant they were treating the HOA leadership as a criminal enterprise. Court proceedings began within the month. On the first day of pre-trial hearings, I sat behind the prosecution table alongside Lisa and several other victims. Beverly entered in a navy suit, wrists cuffed in front, flanked by 2 marshals. Her eyes scanned the room, but she didn't stop on any of us. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Reynolds, made her opening motion with surgical precision. She outlined the scheme, how HOA enforcement had been twisted into a tool for financial exploitation, how vendor kickbacks had been laundered, and how the entire structure depended on falsified authority. Derek Langford pled guilty before the second hearing. So did one of the former board members. Both agreed to testify against Beverly. The most damning evidence came from a series of internal emails pulled from a backup server. One message, dated just 3 weeks before I received my fake foreclosure threat. Read, target Owens next. He's vocal and keeps records. Push a fee into Leon territory and get Langford ready. Properties undervalued. Lisa passed me the printed copy during the hearing. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The judge's expression said enough. By the 4th day, the court had reviewed over 2,000 pages of financial records. Payments routed through dummy vendors, shell corporations, and prepaid debit cards. A forensic examiner from the Department of Justice detailed how the Civic Resource Management account had funneled over $120,000 across state lines. Beverly's defense team tried to argue that she had acted in good faith, that the bylaws had given her broad authority, and that any discrepancies were administrative oversights. The judge wasn't buying it. When the verdict came down, the courtroom was full. Beverly was found guilty on all counts. The RICO conviction alone carried a 20-year maximum. The judge ordered restitution to all identified victims, including those who had lost homes. A court-appointed trustee would oversee damage claims and distribute funds recovered from seized assets. The sentence: 17 years in federal prison without parole. She didn't speak when asked for final remarks. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Some asked if I felt vindicated. I didn't know how to answer that. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about stopping something that never should have happened in the first place. Back in the neighborhood, change was everywhere. The board adopted an open meeting policy. Financial reports were reviewed line by line in front of residents. A new compliance officer was elected, one with no ties to any past administration. They even held a community cookout to celebrate the reforms. I brought a cooler of water and helped Carlos set up tables, but stayed away from the mic. I'd had enough speeches for a lifetime. One evening, Joan stopped by my driveway. She handed me a sealed envelope from the community fund. Inside was a check, not $27, $862. It was the total sum of every fine, fee, and penalty I'd ever paid under Beverly's board. Joan gave a small nod. We audited everything. You never owed a cent. I stood there for a moment, surprised at how light the envelope felt. Then I folded it and slipped it into my back pocket. Lisa walked up behind me with 2 coffees. You keeping that as a souvenir? No, I said. I've got plans for it. The next morning, I donated the entire amount to a local organization that provided legal aid for low-income homeowners facing foreclosure. Anonymous, no letter attached, it just felt right. Spring gave way to summer. The days stretched longer, and the laughter from backyard barbecues returned to the air. The hush that had hung over the neighborhood for so long was gone. Justice had come not just through the courts, but through truth, resilience, and the refusal to stay silent. The HOA tried to take my home over $27. They lost their power, their freedom, and their illusion of control. And I got my peace back.